I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're rolling. Negative stories about politicians get headlines, but there are a ton of good and decent people stepping up to serve in elected office. The Good People Project tells the unsung story of those who wake up every day to do good and selfless work for the American people. Today's guest is quickly becoming one of my favorite colleagues in the Illinois House. There's really no other way to say it. She's a total boss. In 2018, she won an International Humanitarian Award. I've never done that. In 2022, she won the Mrs. America pageant. I've definitely never done that. And in 2023, she was appointed to her current position as an Illinois state rep. She was a dental hygienist by trade, but she put her career to the side to focus on being a mom and advocating for special needs children like her beautiful daughter, Ashlynn. Without any further ado, the wise and talented Nicole La Ha. Nicole, how's life?
That was quite an introduction. Thank you.
Well, I need to be a little careful. I keep catching myself saying that everybody's my favorite person, but it's the truth. I think we have some really amazing colleagues.
I think that's my favorite part of the introduction.
Yeah.
No, we do. You were always one of those supporters from day one.
Thank you.
So you remember those things when you're heading into the big house like that. So
yeah,
no, that's everything's going really good.
Yeah. Well, I've really appreciated working with you. I've really just grown a respect for you. But to that point, we've worked together for 6 months. You're 2023, December 2023, so 7 months now. And I think I speak for all of our caucus members, and frankly, an overwhelming amount of Democrats, whether they would care to admit it publicly or not, but have really just gained an appreciation and a respect for you. And so I'm curious, as you look back on your very brief tenure, what would you say has allowed you or empowered you to earn the respect of so many people in the Capitol?
Well, it's nice to have friendly faces. It's nice to be able to have truthful conversations. And I think that's something that you get when you do speak to me.
Yeah.
Sincerity, it's a truthfulness. And I'm just happy and extremely grateful to be at that table.
Yeah.
I want to work together for the common good. And I think that shows when I show up for work. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think you really are a great listener. That's one thing I really admire about you. And I can tell that you really care about the issues and want to understand their complexities. Kind of one joke that we had between us is I'm a downstate, very conservative. I vote no a lot. And when you first came in, I would give you a hard time like, La Ha, you got to be a no with me. And at first, I just kind of assumed, oh, she's got a moderate district. She's trying to watch her votes. But the more I learned, especially being on the insurance committee together with you, is that if I was a no, most likely, and you were a yes, I would kind of jab you, and you would come back with, no, this is why I was a yes. And you had all these thought out points that I think just demonstrated how much you were listening and how much you really spend time thinking about your votes. You're not just haphazardly pressing buttons. You really care about it.
I think being a special needs mom has opened up my eyes in ways, especially on the insurance committee, where I can relate. A lot of these bills that are being brought forth through constituents or people, they have a problem, right?
Yep.
And this is, we create bills and laws to solve a problem. And so a lot, especially in insurance, these are bills that are affecting everyday lives of people who may needs treatment or prescriptions or things like that. So it's a tough committee for me to be on because I can see how it would benefit. Where I learn from all of you is, even though we have some really great ideas and we have some really great programming, it's the implementation where we have to have checks and balances.
Right.
It's the implementation where we have to say, hey, we're not heartless. We're just making sure that if we do bring this in, that we can pay for it. Because in the long run, it's our constituents who will suffer if we can't. And so that's something I've learned is, I might have the heart for the idea or for the bill, but learning, we can't be yes to everything all the time. We have to prioritize properly.
Yeah, and I know that I can't be no all the time. And there's a lot of times I think, number one, first and foremost, is representing my district.
Sure.
But then from there, the hard thing I think is we have no shortage of good ideas. Every bill that we push, especially in insurance, is intended by the person who's sponsoring it to help people.
Right.
But so often, I don't think we ask the second question. The first question is this a good idea? Is this a good bill? The second question is, can we afford it? Or can the people that we're pushing this off onto afford it?
Right.
And I think it's a tough balance to walk because you kind of are judging what's the ROI on this. And if we are going to push some costs on, is it worth the costs that come with it? And, a lot of times my colleagues across the aisle say, yes, it is immediately.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't know. It's not really our money to spend.
Nothing is free.
Yeah.
Nothing is free. It could be the best idea and someone has to pay for it. And that is, when we, it's a two-party system, and how we identify as Republicans is making sure that we're being responsible, making sure we're making smart decisions, and representing, like you said, our district. And so I think if you can have the heart to recognize it might be good, and then you take a moment to pause and say, how does this help the people who I represent, or would the people who I represent find this important? It does put you in sometimes a little bit of a debacle when it comes to party affiliation.
Yeah, and there's so many times representing the district, I generally say a third of the stuff I'm going to be a no on, a third of the stuff I'm going to be a yes on. But that middle third, I don't know that people appreciate that. Oftentimes, I'm a yes, but that yes is kind of a soft yes because I really struggle with it and head back and forth. There's some days I'm like, I'm a no on this. And then the vote comes and I hear the floor debate and I'm like, man, actually, I hadn't thought of that. I think I'm going to be a yes.
I mean, I think it's a really good sign of a legislator is when you can kind of debate both sides on some of these. I mean, there are some divisive issues that we do face where we are just like, that is not something that I can get behind, unfortunately. I mean, we know today. But most of the things that we do see in insurance in particular, I think we can see the benefit, right? We could see why. But making sure that that's why I love our checks and balances. A lot of times I think people will ask as a Republican, why do you do this? You lose all the time. I think the committees are a great explanation of why we need to be at that table. So.
Yeah, and just because we might not win a lot of the contentious votes, it doesn't necessarily mean that we lost.
Sure.
Because even if I'm not a yes on something, that committee process allows you to be a healthy amount of pushback and say, hey, maybe this should be a may, or, you scope this for the entire state. Maybe you start with a certain portion that this affects more specifically. And so even if the final product isn't something I can vote yes on, if you can earn the respect of the other side and they appreciate that what you're pushing back on is making their bill better, well, that's what they want.
Sure.
They want a better bill.
I agree with you. I think that is the majority of, all of us coming together and making a good bill better, right? And a lot of the times when I'm a no on something, it comes down to language. It really does. It comes down to the shall, the may, making sure that we have a limit to certain things, right? We make sure we're specific. And if there isn't specific enough language or something I'm not comfortable with, it will be a no. And you have to sit with that, right? You have to be okay with that.
Well, one thing that you highlighted that I think is really valuable for folks to know is that we really have a diverse set of backgrounds. There's 118 members in the House, and every one of those members has a unique life story. There's lawyers, there's doctors, there's teachers, there's firefighters, there's police officers. You name it, we probably got somebody who's at least familiar with that role. And you are just such a Swiss Army knife because, you had a professional career in medicine as a hygienist. But then you left that and you did comms, you did the Mrs. America. You're such a strong advocate for so many issues. So what would you say of your background is really the strength that you bring to make the body better?
I like to learn. I like to learn about different topics, different things. Clearly, I have an eclectic background.
Yeah.
I actually graduated with a bachelor's of fine arts. I wanted to be a museum curator. I loved learning about why something was created. And I think that's kind of the common factor in all of my roles is why is it working this way? How can we fix it? Right? I can identify a problem. How can I fix it? Or how can I change it? And I think all of these roles, that's what we have in common. Being a dental hygienist, treating someone's oral health is a window to their whole holistic health. Being Mrs. America, I was able to travel the United States advocating for accessible places, seeing a problem, using this title that it's unique. It's a unique title to be able to create change.
Yeah. So let's pick on that one a little bit. So Mrs. America.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. The only thing I know about these things is people ask questions like, what's your perfect date? And give answers like, that's a tough one. I'd have to say April 25th because it's not too hot, not too cold. All you need is a light jacket. little miscongeniality for the listeners.
Good quote.
But in all serious, Mrs. America, what is it to a layperson like me?
Sure.
What's going on there?
So Mrs. America was created to highlight today's married woman, right? And of course, it's progressed. We actually matched the presidency. There's been 47 of us now.
Okay.
So it's been around for a really long time, and it's evolved and it's grown to be what it is today, which is a really great empowering community of women who like to give back to their community and, kind of have a little fun while doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't take it ourselves too seriously, but you learn how to take something that you might be passionate about and turn that into public speaking, turn that into public advocacy, using this role as a married woman or a mother. Some of us are moms, some of us are not, to create change, to create this ripple effect. And so
how does one get into that in the first place?
So you have to win your state first. Some states, like some bigger states, have like a preliminary, and then, then you go for your state pageant. And so I won Mrs. Illinois. And then from there, I got to represent Illinois at nationals, which was held in Las Vegas. And, all 50 of us were there, and all 49 of us were there. And it's kind of like a process of elimination. It's kind of funny. It's kind of like survival of the fittest. It's about a week long, and we are judged in different things. We're judged in personal interview. We have to convince 5 people that we've never met before that we can carry this brand and this title. And we only have 4 minutes to do it privately, so learning to communicate effectively, learning to get your message across in a way that's relatable.
Yeah.
It's a talent.
And so do you just have a 4-minute elevator pitch, or are you kind of trying to read the audience on what they're interested in?
The first section is private one-on-one. There's tables in a room, then you go and you sit down, and you have a judge in front of you, and they begin. The rule of thumb is you let them begin, and most of the time, the first question out of most judges' mouth is, tell me about yourself. So yeah, it's a little bit of an elevator pitch, a lot of women, including myself, have years of coaching of how to answer questions, effectively, in a concise manner. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. We kind of train ourselves that your answer should be no longer than 30 seconds because we want them to ask us as much as possible, to get to know us as much as possible.
That's such a great thing to bring to this role where, somebody asks you a question, answer it.
Right.
And how do you answer it in a concise way that really gets to their point? Because so often, if you're ill prepared, people can go on these long meandering questions and then they don't answer it. And I don't think a lot of time it's ill-intended, like they're ducking.
Right.
They just don't know the answer. And so they're kind of just buying time to figure it out.
Exactly.
That's not helpful.
I mean, I've done that too in the beginning, like a untrained interviewer. You have this tendency to want to have an answer right away. And I've coached young women and girls in this, and it's okay to take a minute to think, or, and understanding who you are and why you want to win or why you want to do this or move this bill or whatever is huge in preparing yourself for an interview. Why do you want to be here? What can I tell you about myself that would make you realize that I'm serious about this, I have a plan, and I'm committed to it? And those are all things you have to go ready with a game face in for these interview processes and get out the information and try to control the interview so you are telling them what you want them to know.
So I wasn't planning on going this way, but there's so the presidential debate will be in history by the time that we air this. It's happening for us tomorrow. When I air this, it'll probably be happening for at least a week in the past. If somebody's doing a debate and they have a 1-minute chance to answer a question, as somebody who's coached on this, what would kind of be a way that you would suggest that somebody structures an answer to a question, how they think about structuring their answer in a way that's going to be what the person wants to hear and is also maybe understandable?
Being in a debate type of situation, being direct and honest. I think that's the best and most efficient way. Debates are fun for me. I really enjoy them. I love the art of debate. I love the art of conversation. And most of us can answer the question right away and get a really good understanding of where you come from, background, or where your mindset is. But what happens is we start to veer off. And like you said, we start to branch off. And that's when you start to lose your listeners. You start to, oh, well, she had me in that first 30 seconds, right? And then they started going off the path,
Yeah.
So answering the question directly, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
And in a debate, you also want people to get a really good sense of who you are as a person, not just about policy, but who you are as a person, explaining why this is important to you, explaining why you think this is something that would resonate with your voters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a talent as well.
Yeah. I think the best person I had explained it to me is to use situation, complication, resolution.
Sure.
So let's say somebody asked me, how am I going to fix America? Well, the situation, we're struggling with inflation. We've got an open border. We've got wars happening all over the place. That situation. Complication is, well, that makes things hard for us because if people aren't here documented, how do we have a pulse on them? How are we tracking that? With inflation, gosh, that's really hard for families because grocery prices are getting higher. The economy, same story. So that's situation, complication. And the resolution is, so what am I going to do about it?
Sure.
So, because of those things, we got to make sure that we close the border, and we got to make sure that we're getting people back to work and using American energy so their fuel costs are coming down. And there's a lot of times I see people answer and kind of jumble that structure. And we kind of had this cultural way of like, when you talk to somebody and you converse, it's sort of like doing a dance. And if somebody's dancing wrong, you're not really understanding them because they might be speaking English, but they're not speaking in a way that we're trained to
relate to.
Yeah, hear it, digest it.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And I think that comes with practice. But then I also think it comes down to knowing your issues and how you feel about them. I think I recognize that when you ask someone a question and they really don't know how they feel, that's when you start to get these wishy-washy answers, right?
Yeah.
So studying the issues that may or may not come up, understanding the topics that are important to people, and really sitting down and kind of just, I do this. I meditate with myself. How do I really feel about this? How do I really feel about X, Y, Z? And what am I going to do about that? What can I do about that? And I think it just comes down to really understanding who you are and who you want to be as a leader or as a legislator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I once heard somebody say, don't be afraid to question what you think. I think that if you really have confidence in your position, you should have no problem pushing back on it and knowing that you're right. And maybe you're actually not right. And you should be comfortable with, I'm more concerned about getting to the right place than I am concerned about being right today. So that's number one. And then number two that you're hitting on is, I would say the 5 Ps, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And when you go in and you're ready, you're in such a better position to give a great answer because you're not fumbling around for 10 seconds thinking, what do I think about this?
Exactly. And, I think it is important that you're honest with yourself because that honesty translates into confidence. And also understanding that you may have felt one way about a topic at one time, and then you've learned something from it. And now it's okay to change your perspective. It's okay to pivot, and it's okay to recalibrate. And I think sometimes we have a hard time admitting that, right? Yeah. Events change us as we get older. I know having a daughter with different needs has changed me completely as a person.
Yeah.
So allowing that process to take place organically, I think really helps you become better at answering how you feel and how you plan to not create problems, solve problems. We don't want to create problems.
And I think some people worry a little bit about being a flip-flopper.
Yeah.
But a flip-flopper is somebody who a month ago was pro-life from conception and it is now pro-choice to 9 months. I mean, that is a flip-flopper where you totally change, like your value structure is completely different. But I do think you can evolve, and just be transparent. Hey, I used to think this, but I found some new information. And because of what I learned, I've tweaked what I think about this. I think people want to hear that. That's not being a flip-flopper. That's just getting smarter.
I think that's growth. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can have someone who have told you a story that you've never heard before, and it impacts you in a way that you start to change how you perceive things. And I think that shows growth. And I would love that in a leader.
Yeah.
I think that shows empathy.
So this is kind of random, but for my entire childhood, we would give our dogs chicken bones. You're not supposed to.
Right.
And my grandpa would say, dogs have been eating chicken since the beginning of time. It's not going to hurt them. It's never hurt them before. And so I would give the dogs chicken bones. And then when I was like in college, I would give my dog a chicken bone. And this guy said, you can't do that. I said, dogs have been eating chickens for a long time. He goes, yeah, but that's a fried chicken. And when it heated, the structure of the bone changes, and so it can splinter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was totally wrong. And it's just such an example of you're going to have instances where a new piece of information is going to be entered that completely shifts your paradigm on an issue. And thankfully, this was something, I never had a dog get sick or anything. And that's kind of a small thing in the scheme of things.
Right.
But just an example of you're going to get new information. It's going to totally change your opinion.
And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a great sign of, a good leader. I really do, is being able to change or pivot or recalibrate, standing firm in your beliefs and your values. But this is different. This is just learn something about dog bones.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, listeners. A little bit of a dog bone fact story there.
Definitely fascinated with that. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, then we're really covering the hard-hitting topic today, La Ha.
It's good. It's good. I mean, we probably just told a lot of. Actually, dog.
We saved some dogs. Yeah.
Well, dog. Yeah. Exactly. No.
Okay, so let's talk about something important.
Okay.
You won an International Humanitarian Award. I've known you before we were colleagues. I never do this, so tell me a little bit about what that's.
That was a huge honor. We grew up in my family with, I love this term. Someone said it to me, oh, you just have this heart to serve. And it just stuck with me because I think at a young age, we were taught in our house to serve. My dad still carries around blessing bags in his car when he sees someone who's homeless or might need, a blessing bag to have some socks and some chapstick and, some change. And that's how we grew up. And so I've always had this mentality of first seeing people who may be in different circumstances than me, understanding and seeing and noticing. And I think that's huge as a young kid. I try to teach my children to recognize opening up their eyes and looking. So I think it comes from that, just this long history of serving, and it is who I am. It wasn't anything that I was attaining or anything I was trying to hit a goal. It's just something that was recognized, just me being me. And it came through community service. So that's how it started. It was through community service and helping the disability community and, trying to build accessible parks.
Yeah.
And having conversations, showing people you care, and then having people join that. I had a non-for-profit that basically just did kind things for communities. And
so is that Victoria's Voice?
Victoria's Voice is something different.
Okay. Is that what the award was for?
The award was previous before that, but through there is this Mrs. Universe organization, which is a world.
Oh wow! Not just Mrs. America. Yeah, we got a promotion. Miss Universe.
It was a universal award. It was. I did accept it in the Philippines, and it was based on the work. I hate calling it work because it's serving. It's serving my disability community that I really fell in love with once we had my daughter and my eyes were open to this new world. So that's kind of what the work was based on. And it was a huge honor. And it also just kind of gave me the confidence that I'm on the right path.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your dad with the blessing bags. I've never heard of that, but it's a great thing. You see somebody, you want to help them.
Yeah.
You maybe only have cash, but gosh, how much better is it if in your backseat you have some things that they actually need?
Yeah.
So where would you say that your dad's desire to serve came from?
I think my dad grew up really poor.
Mm-hmm.
I think he grew up, with a family of 10. And, when he was 18 years old, he had nowhere to go. And the family needed to take care of the younger ones. So then he went to the Marines. And so I think knowing that feeling of hunger, knowing that feeling of having to, scrap to get what to live, I think it's something that never left him, and I think that was something he instilled in my brother and my sister and my kids. And he's always been kind like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just such a humbling reminder to so many of us that the margin between having and not having is pretty narrow. I mean, you can see people that have been tremendously successful, they make some bad choices, and all of a sudden it all goes away.
Yeah, or like, so my dad and my brother and my sister, they were based in real estate. And when we had that market crash of 2008, we went from haves to have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've lived through that too. I remember coming home from like an event and seeing my dad in his office, like in the back of the house, and like just seeing him with his hands on his head. And that impacted me in a way that has never left my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's, having a family, and how do you feed your family when everything you've worked for is almost gone?
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that time. It was a painful time, but it gave me a perspective that I had never had up until that point.
And I also think it's such a great reminder that wealth and success, these things aren't what drive happiness.
Sure.
I remember when I was a junior in high school, that I saw this chart, and it was how much money drives happiness. And from making $0 a year up to then it was 70,000, probably now with inflation, it's 100,000. Money actually does help you become happier because your car is not breaking down. You're not sweating over how you're going to put food on the table. I mean, it actually gives you an amount of peace of mind. And so it's a pretty, linear growth up to that, call it $100,000 mark. And then from there, it really diminishes because, if you're making 200 instead of 100, maybe you drive a Lexus instead of a Toyota, but you still have a nice car that you're proud to drive. It's not like you're that much happier because you have a nicer thing.
I think when you have money, it alleviates stress, and stress makes you sick. And when my daughter was in the NICU, my husband and I were just starting off. We didn't have, we were living literally paycheck to, we still do live paycheck, but at that time we really didn't have any other means.
Yeah.
And the worry of where we're going to get money to pay for her medical needs was enough to make us both sick.
Yeah. Yeah. Physically sick.
With anxiety or mental health, issues. So I mean, when you don't have and you have no way of getting it, that's a very claustrophobic, scary feeling. And you're right. It impacts your health and how you live. I would agree with you that it's not that money buys happiness, but money gives you security.
Yeah.
Security is peace.
Yeah. To a point. And then I think people think, oh gosh, going from 0 to 100 made me so much happier. If I can just get this next level.
And we know that's not true.
And
absolutely.
It's your family. It's what you do for, helping your community and your service. That's really what makes life rich.
I agree.
But you got to kind of have it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got to kind of have the basics.
Have your needs met first, right? Your basic needs met. And for me, when my family is happy, I'm happy. When my daughter gets the treatment she needs and she's happy, I feel great. When my son can participate in baseball and I am able to give him that experience, I feel great, and those are privileges. And I'm grateful for those, but I never lose sight of what it feels like to also not have those things.
Yeah, it's very humbling.
Yes, very.
So switching gears a little bit. So the way that I first met you is you used to help with communications for Senate Republicans.
Yes.
So I know that being away from your kids isn't new for you. You've spent time in Springfield before. But with having two pretty young kiddos, how do you find it being away from them?
Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely a challenge. It's something I have to prep myself for. And I'm usually good. In January, we're only gone for a week. And February, we're only gone for a week. And then it starts to ramp up in March, April. And then come May, it's like, do I have a family anymore?
Yeah.
And it gets very lonely. So I try to be creative. I try to FaceTime them when I'm on the floor. I'm sure you've seen me. I like to bring them on the floor and FaceTime. I like to include them in some of the votes that I take, like Cristiano, we're going to take a vote on the floor today. And this is what it says. How would you vote today? Just including them and challenging their thought process and opening them up to things that maybe like a 9-year-old and 6-year-old aren't typically introduced to.
Yeah.
And they really enjoy that. They really, really do. I try to make them part of my team. I FaceTime them every night. I make sure I'm home by a certain time every night and make sure that they get to see me and that I care. And then I FaceTime in the morning before they go to school. So we make it work. And I have to tell myself it's just temporary, right? It's only,
being away from them.
Yeah. It's only April and May that are very hard. Everything else we can make work. And I have a really great support system. My mom and my dad, my brother, my sister, my husband, they're all in.
Yeah.
I would not be able
Team
to.
La Ha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would not be able to do this if that was not there, to having such young kids. But I feel grateful that I have such young kids and I still get to sit at that table. Because I think it's important that we have that perspective in the General Assembly.
I can also imagine that a big reason that you're doing this is for your kids. And so even though it's probably hard to be away from them, just reminding yourself, this is why I'm here has to be just so powerful.
Absolutely. It is my why. I keep a picture of both my kids right there at my desk when we're voting. And I think it's really easy to kind of forget your reason for doing things when you're down there, right?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of excluded from your district and your family. So I have a little brief statement of why I do this, and it just reminds me, like when it's 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why am I doing this? But it's such a privilege. Like
it's an honor.
Every day I walk in there and I say, I get to do this. I've raised my hand to support young family and my kids. With that though is learning prioritization, right? Learning when to say no. I raise my hand for everything. I'll be there.
Yeah.
Got an event, I'll be there. You want me to support you? I'll be there.
Yeah.
My kids are young, and so they need their mom. They crave their mom. And so understanding that and learning when enough is enough, and learning when I need to go to this game or I have to go to this event is a challenge.
And, I remember one time I walked into your office and I said, hey, how's it going? And you said, I just miss my kids so much. And I remember thinking, this chick is such a rock star. Like, here we are doing these big, giant things, and you're prioritizing those big things too. But like the main thing that's on your mind is just missing your kids. And the amount of times that I would see you on the house floor, and you would like fist bump, and I'd be like, what's going on? You're like, my son just got a run in baseball. I was like, I just love that you're just so in tune with that.
Yeah, I definitely thank God for Game Changer. All those baseball parents absolutely know what I'm talking about. You celebrate their wins even when you can't be there, and it is so fun to be part of their lives doing this.
Yeah,
and I know they're very proud of me.
I'm sure they are.
I know they're so proud of me, and they're so excited, and it's a very special time in our lives. I'm very grateful.
So after working with Senate Comms, I have a messaging question for you. So let's say you have a magical power to send a message to every person in the entire country. And maybe it's something inspirational, something that informs them, something that really just makes America a better place. So let's say you send them a message, and I guess sending them the message isn't magical. Maybe the magic part is that they actually read it. So you get to send a message to everybody. What do you think that the country needs to hear right now?
You're not alone. I think people need to know that in their circumstances, in whatever situation they're finding themselves in, whether that be at a high or a low, you're not alone. To not feel isolated in your situation. I think mental health is such a big issue with people, and it's easy to isolate yourselves. And I find that I thrive when I know I have support, when I have someone who sees me, when I have someone who hears me. And I might not be able to fix your problems.
Yeah.
I might not be able to make it go away, but I want you to know I hear you and I see you.
Yeah, I think, as Americans, that's really been a strength of ours, is that we're a community, we're very independent people, but, I think just part of our heritage as, being a people that rebelled, overthrew, and then we're like, we're all in this together. We're all going forward together, and we're incredibly generous. But it does kind of seem like over the last several years, we've maybe kind of forgotten that. And I also think it's a lot more that people are still generous, but because we sort of buy what we see and we read, we assume that others aren't anymore. And just such a great reminder that, no, we still are that way. If you ask for help, you'll find a helping hand out there.
I think you're absolutely correct. We've been, more than I'm in the district and having conversations with constituents, there's so many assumptions, right? I assume you're this way because you've been given this grouping, right? Or, for a fact, we're Republicans, right? People assume we're all the same. And it's kind of just having that understanding that one size does not fit all.
Yes,
right?
so true.
And putting people in a box is so hurtful, not just to that person, but to a culture or a community. And I think when we start to challenge ourselves to start to see that, I think that's when we start to see community growth. And that's when we see a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to focus on.
Yeah. And especially in your race, where I can just imagine the BS they're going to do against you. Right wing, extremist, MAGA. And I look at you and you're like the most compassionate person. You are here to help. The reason that, you have all these accomplishments is because of your advocacy for underprivileged people and people that are the most vulnerable. And if they're willing to paint somebody like you as being an extremist, I think it just highlights the extremes that they're willing to go to hide the truth from people. And so I know that that's a battle that you have to work against to show who you are.
Yeah.
But anybody that meets you has to see so clearly what you stand for.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when we raise our hand to be in the legislation, that's something we sign up for, I guess. I'm not looking forward to that. But I also see it in pageantry, too. I see it in the things I've done before, this preconceived notion of who they think you are. So I really enjoy breaking those stereotypes. I really enjoy having conversations. And if you have a conversation with me and you still feel a specific way about me, at least I was able to meet you. At least we were able to have a conversation. At least you were able to see, you know what? She's actually willing to listen to me and my perspective. And I think that's the biggest thing that as candidates we need to do is offer and allow accessibility to conversations to candidates.
And you've been on a lot of journeys in your life. You've climbed a lot of big mountains, but this one's probably a little bit unique. As you've gone through this journey, are there some things that you found out about yourself or just things that you picked up along the way that maybe have surprised you?
Absolutely. This is hard.
Yeah.
This is very hard. I wear our votes very heavy. I push that green or I push that red button and it just doesn't fly out of my head. It's something I bring home with me. It's something I think about. It's something I study for. And so I take it very seriously. I think what I've learned is unless you're telling people the process you go through when you decide to vote a certain way, they don't know, right? They think it's an easy thing for us to do. They think we just, push that button and we move on, which is not the case for most of us.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that this is a very hard job on both sides of the aisle. I have so much respect for everybody who is in the General Assembly.
Yeah. There was one vote that I had in 2023 that I was really seeing both sides on. And then I remember going home into the district and I had a constituent that was pretty upset with me about my vote. And he's saying, but what about this and this and this? And I'm like, I agree with you on every single one of those points. And I'm sure he's thinking, well, then how the heck did you see it? I'm like, well, I agree with all those points, but then there's also competing points that I agree with, and it's just not that cut and dry. And I appreciate that you think about it as much as you do.
I do. I think about it a lot, probably more than I should, but I don't take these votes lightly. Even some of the, the more simple ones. I'm always very pro healthcare. I'm very pro disability advocacy, and you have to have some sort of base to go in with, right? Because you don't want to be influenced by your party. You don't want to be influenced by the opposite party. You don't want to be influenced by lobbyists. You want to vote your district. And if you vote your district and you know that was the right thing to do, you can sleep at night.
Yeah.
You really can. You could say, you know what, this was the best thing for me. Or I had so many people email me concerned about this. This was the right thing to do. And so, we have a lot of hard votes. There's still a couple of votes where I'm just like, oh,
yeah,
gosh, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. So this is hard. This is tough.
So let's say the year is 2034. You've been doing this for 10 years, and you're like, all right, I've had enough, but goodbye. What are some things that you putting that hat on 10 years down the road that you'd like to look back on over your tenure and be so proud that you accomplished either in your voting record or the bills you passed or just the way that you carry yourself? What would you like to look back on and see?
I'd like to look back and know that I made life better for people. I'd like to...
That's the whole point.
Absolutely. I would like for people to remember me as that, bleeding heart politician that really worked hard and made life better for family.
Yeah. Well, you're off to an awesome start on that.
Thank you.
You're doing an awesome job this summer. I'm so excited to see how the fall turns out. I got a hunch we got a great win coming here in Lamont. And to be more proud of you. And it's just such an honor to work with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Travis.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.